These are art styles. And this is me. And this is me drawing me. And this is me commentating over me drawing me. Whenever I create art, I always tend to create realistic or at least semi-realistic pieces. But there are so many different art styles out there that inspire me that I wanted to test some of them myself to see if one of them becomes the way that I express myself in the future. And what better way to find a new visual language for myself than by creating myself? I've never been that great at creating likenesses, so this will be a great way to improve my likeness sculpting skills, or will ruin the whole project because I fail miserably. As the genius I am, I didn't want to waste days on this project just for it to fail in the end because I can't nail my likeness, so I started with my own style. If I can't do it in my comfort zone, I might as well give up. This doesn't look like me yet, but even these big shapes are important to get right. My first goal was to create all the basic parts of the face, which I can then adjust to match my own. I've sculpted so many heads over the years that even in this first block out phase, I could focus on capturing my likeness rather than the anatomy of, for example, the eye. Slowly but surely, a face emerges which, with a lot of changing, tweaking and switching between my sculpt and reference, looks more and more like me. Once the hair was done, I was pretty happy with the rough sculpt. Now to realistify it, I can transfer its shape over to a clean model of mine with the good old soft wrap method, and now I can refine the face even more for those sweet details. It looks kinda cursed, but also more realistic, so to finish it up, I replaced the sculpted hair with actual hair strands. To sum it up, first I determined the hair flow with these big strands, then I cover the whole head with hair, and afterwards add some variation to make it look more natural. And after a few more adjustments, bada bing, bada boom, the finished head is in front of you. I thought this looks pretty good, but just to get a second opinion, I asked my dad what he thinks about it.
Papa? Ja. Ganz kurz kommen. Ja. Bin ich das?
Okay, clearly there are a few more things I could improve, but you know what I have less of than the support from my dad? Time. So let's start with the first new style. For this project, I went through my bookmarks of artists that inspire me, and from those, Ilia is probably the most well known. I decided to choose one artwork and use that as the main inspiration. And with main inspiration, I mean copying as much as possible to create something as similar as possible. I duplicated my realistic model and used that in combination with a more refined hair sculpt as my base. Now to recreate this illustration style, I could take the colors from the original and use them on my own model. After doing that for 15 minutes, I realized how horrible it looked. But I guess that's the whole point of this project, to get out of my stylistic comfort zone. So I continued adding more and more colors, even stuff like small highlights, but it still looked kind of weird until I switched my viewport style. And all of a sudden, everything made sense. And with this new level of confidence, I continued finishing the head and moving on to the peripherals. Conveniently, the eyes in the reference are blue just like mine, so I recreated them with all the little details and flourishes that is part of Ilia's style. Last but not least, the hair and outfit are quite simple, consisting of a few bold colors which round out the character and finish this first new style. Now from 2D and super vibrant to still vibrant, but now in 3D. She has this way of making her sculpts look sort of tangible, almost like they're real figurines made out of stone or clay. First, I wanted to change my head sculpt. I asked myself what a stone sculpt would look like if you were to sculpt it in real life. It's probably pretty hard to create perfectly smooth shapes, so you would probably have more sharp edges and uneven surfaces. Sharpening the most prominent edges in the face already made a big difference, but then I discovered my good old friend, the scrape brush. Just look at it, it's perfect. Especially once I went onto the hair, you can see how much more stony it looks. Once I was happy with the sculpt, I added some colors. I grabbed some free Photoshop brushes, which I repurposed so I can use them in Blender to give me that gritty, realistic look. For the previous one, I tried to make them blend together as much as possible, but for this one, I purposely didn't do that. Now to bring it all together, I added dirt in the creases as well as some worn edges, and after adding some sweet surface imperfections, it is done. Out of all the styles in this project, the next one is probably the closest to my own. It's realism, but without all the fine details. The biggest difference is probably the hair. I like to punish myself by creating each individual strand of hair for hours on end. David uses curves instead, which are basically these lines that you can apply different profiles to change their shape. Now I'm all for shaping some curves, but so far I haven't found a style and workflow yet that works for me. It always seemed so tedious, laying out each individual strand until you filled the whole head. But I gave it a try and I must say, it's as tedious as I thought. I know you can create cool hairstyles with it, but I haven't found the best workflow yet that works for me. I'll probably get back to it at some point though. Ah yes, anime, the place where my anatomy knowledge goes to die. A lot of anime artists modeled their characters by polymodeling. In short, you start with a simple shape and cut, transform and extend that piece of geometry until you've created a full character. I grabbed a character sheet of an anime dude off the internet that resembled me somewhat and went to work. And after a while it actually felt kind of intuitive. Wanted to define a shape more, add some cuts, and then make the geometry around that make sense. I realized that I could spend hours on only this. Hours that I don't have, so once I reached the point where you can see that it's supposed to be a human, I moved on to the hair, which is basically the same workflow, or at least very similar. I very quickly realized that this is not gonna look like me at all, plus I wasn't enjoying the process, so I quickly finished the hair, added a shirt, and zoomed through the coloring process to leave this one behind me as fast as possible. Let's do something different. As someone who started drawing before I added another D to my 2Ds, this one was a fun throwback to the good old days. The grease pencil in Blender allows you to draw in 3D space, and Deduce shows what awesome stuff you can do with that. But I was so focused on capturing my likeness and the art style that I didn't really utilize the 3D capabilities at all. But it was still refreshing to go from this fairly strict and precise anime style to this fun and quirky doodle style. The more I actually worked on this one, the more I realized how complex this style actually is. At first it just looks like a few lines and solid colors, but when you look closer you can see a sort of chromatic aberration effect around the black lines. Sometimes the outlines are black, sometimes they are a darker shade of the inner color, and sometimes the shading isn't done with colors at all, but with this dotted halftone pattern. There's probably a lot more that I've missed, which is probably also why my final version doesn't look nearly as cool as their work. The next three use the same techniques to highlight different things, so why don't we compare them? There's probably more that goes into each one of these art styles, but that's how I understood and have used them. Dimitrio uses very broad and simple shapes for the hair as well as the face. They combine smooth surfaces and sharp edges to highlight the unique features and simplify everything else. And when they use edges, they tend to be quite sharp. A good example for that is the nose. Look at that. Look how sharp it is. It's wild how sharp these shoulders are. Also, the eyes are bigger as well. I mean, just look how big those eyes are. That's something I wanted to include in my version as well. It's sort of kind of creepy, but the more I worked on it, the more it came together. For the hair, I've used curves again, but this time I made them a bit broader, only really focusing on the main flow and shape of the hairstyle. The fewer curves I have to use to create a hairstyle, the better. And this one is close to as few as it gets, so maybe I'll actually use this one in the future. After adding a few colors here or there, it was already done, and I'm quite happy with how it turned out. Now onto probably the most well-known 3D art style. Fortnite also uses smooth surfaces and sharp edges, but here the edges aren't as prominent. They just slightly enhance the sharpness of the actual features to pronounce them a bit more. So after creating another likeness sculpt of myself and failing horribly, I thought I might as well just stylize my original sculpt. And after flattening some areas and sharpening some edges, I thought this looks pretty good. You don't have to change too much to create a pretty good stylized art style. That's probably also why they can add so many real people into the game while making them recognizable. And what else makes someone recognizable? Of course, the hairstyle. And here I might have found the most fun way to create hair curves for me. You can use the same hair grooming system for curves that I've used for the realistic hair, which means that I can actually brush them into the right position, which is way more fun for me. And after the basic hair groom was done, I could go back into these curves and use my good old friend the flatten brush to give the individual strands a more unique shape. Now after some brushes have been flattened, the hairstyle was finished and I was happy. The last of the 3 art styles in this group focuses more on making the face a bit softer. Once again, we have sharp edges and big eyes, but this one just looks softer. I don't exactly know how to describe it, but hopefully you get what I mean when looking at these examples. Everything is just a bit rounder, simpler, and reduced to the most unique features. Even the hair is one big round shape that's only really broken by a few sharp edges and creases. And after adding a bit more redness to the face with some colors, it was already done. The last 2 styles are not actually modeling styles, but more display styles. Just with custom shaders, you can turn your model into a hand-drawn sketch or an actual painting. So to finish this project, I explored the world of stylized shading a bit, following a tutorial by Christoph Dedin and buying the Live Paint shader by Alan Wyatt.